Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. And today's episode is Enterprise Season 2, Episode 9, Singularity. So, this is going to be a probably short review because not much happens in the episode, but I'm going to review it nonetheless. Uh, so it starts off, and we see the Enterprise bridge, and all the senior officers are passed out on the floor, except for T'Pol, who's doing a. And I see that DJ Play Nice is here. Hello. And we see, except for T'Pol, who is doing a first science officer's log, and they're near a black hole, which we see outside the exterior view of the Enterprise, and she is basically sending this message out to. She sends out a distress call to the Vulcans, uh, and is saying that basically they're not likely to survive past getting past this black hole. So they have to navigate like past it, and but it's not likely they're going to make it. And she gives out a date, which is August 14th, 2151. Which a lot of times with doing these reviews, I don't really bother with star dates, or in this case the actual, like, I forget what they call it, like a Earth date, um, because star dates don't, they changed the way that they, in the original series they changed it, um, in Next Generation, uh, how they calculate it. And I think from Next Generation and through Voyager, it kind of stayed the same. But people that get really deep in the weeds, like that SNL sketch, on Stardate 24786, 8675309. um, Captain Kirk said this, and which contradicts Stardate 597854, where he said something else, and then Shatner's like, "It's just a TV show." There's my Shatner impression. It's not good. It's just a TV show. Relax. Spot. Um, so I just don't bother with him. But on Enterprise, they go by Earth calendar, year, time, and whatnot. So whenever they do that, I try to note it. Anyway, that's basically the teaser. Is, oh my God, we're all gonna die. Um, which I've said in the past, Enterprise seems to have the shortest teasers, um, for whatever reason, and it, a lot of times when they're short like that, it's usually everybody's gonna die. So so then we go back to Paul continuing her analysis, and she's not very hopeful. And then we get to like 2 days prior. Archer's talking about how this is a class 4 black hole, whatever that means. Um, and he notes that the Vulcans have observed black holes in the past, many times. This is the first time that humans have observed one up front. And of course, we know in the real world that science finally proved that they are real. I think it was a few years ago, which is pretty cool because what's his name? Mr. Wheelchair Guy and uh, Kip Thorne had sort of theorized about them back in the 60s. I can't think of his name. Hawking, Stephen Hawking. God, jeez. Okay, I was gonna do the robot voice, but never mind. Um, and then a little side tangent because I can't have an episode without a side tangent. I used to think in Deep Space Nine, yeah, Stephen Hawking, yeah. In Deep Space Nine, the wormhole there looked ridiculous. Like it didn't look believable. I know it was the 90s and they were just starting off with CGI and all, but even back then I was like, this looks ridiculous. How do you do a practical effect of a wormhole? I don't, as the critical drinker would say, don't know. Getting all kinds of um, impressions here. Um, DJ Play Nice is saying it was cool at the time. I didn't think, even at the time, it looked cool. I thought it looked ridiculous. But anyway, and often, for years, um, I couldn't, like, imagine what it, in real life, what a wormhole would look like. I know somebody's going to correct me. You can't see a wormhole. Yes, I get it, but you can see the accretion uh, disk. And whenever it's depicted in science fiction in the past, it never looked, never looked really good to me until I saw Interstellar. And I don't know jack, hardly shit about science and physics. I hardly know shit about a lot of things. But I'm able to wrap my head around concepts, and if you explain to me things like I'm a 5 year old, usually I can get it. Um, so then Interstellar came out, and they showed what it's supposed to look like, and I'm a visual learner. And then when they explained the time dilation, which we see time dilation in Star Trek books, starting with the next with the original series. It's happened in TNG, it's happened in Deep Space Nine, and it's happened in Voyager. Even with those episodes, I couldn't really wrap my head around the concept. But thank God Christopher Nolan made it easy for dumbasses like me to understand. And Project Hail Mary did the same. And same with The Martian. Understanding science for a 5 year old, an adult 5 year old. When you see them go to the water planet, Miller's planet, and then they come back up, and the black dude, I forget his name, has it's 20 years has passed. For an idiot like me, that helps me explain time dilation. I can physically see it happen, even though oh, did Nolan really go out there and film a black hole? No, I mean, obviously he didn't. But then after the movie came out, they released a book called The Science of Interstellar. And I can read. Um, Back then, my vision was like 2020 or pretty close to it. I didn't have to wear reading glasses. And I was able to read. I didn't finish that book, but I got about halfway through. I don't know why I stopped. I don't remember. I just got sidetracked or whatever. And that book explains it in a way that I was eager to have a further understanding of it. And it also has visuals in it, which Kip Thorne, as I was speaking about earlier, um, and I also watched every single behind the scene commentary, listened to the commentary, every single behind the scene thing of Interstellar, because I walked away from that movie saying, I'm not exactly sure what happened. And I had to watch it several times. I had to watch Tenet like 2 times before I. And people shit on that movie, especially since the Odyssey's coming out, and people are shitting on that movie before it's even out. And I get it. We're going. I heard Nerdrotic talk about it today, and how that we're just basing our thoughts on what the trailers and promotional material. And I'm not. I don't really care. I just want to see the movie, and then I'll decide what I think about it. But anyway, people shitted on Tenet at go that it was a time travel movie, but that doesn't really prepare you for is what's happening. You're watching everything in reverse, and so it's one of those movies. I have no desire to go see it a third time to ever watch it again. So I'm not enough about that. I'm just saying that I'm glad that uh, movies like Interstellar exist so that dumb people like me can understand these concepts. And we now have proof that black holes are real. Planetary systems. So that's an interesting science aspect of it. Um, so he tells them to set course for it. Tells her to set course for it, and he's ill, and that Hoshi wants to take over the mess hall while the chef is sick, and to which he grants permission for that and says that Malcolm wants to talk about like uh, a tactical alert system. Uh, and then Archer starts talking about how he has somebody had written a biography about his father, and they want him to write the preface for it. And they want it to be brief, just a couple of paragraphs. That's it. And then we see Gayweather, Mr. Prideweather, as Admiral Teague says. We see him enter sick bay and says that he has a headache. And Phlox wants to do. It starts off as a minor examination because he says it could be anything. Then we see on the bridge, Trip is working on the captain's chair, and he's drilling. And T'Pol is there, and she asks him to stop. And he says that it's that the captain had ordered him to do this, and she says that Vulcans have sensitive hearing, so he purposely makes it louder, and she leaves and says she'll be in her quarters. Then we see the armory where Archer enters, and Malcolm says that he would have came to him, and he says it's no problem. What do you want to talk about? So he says that he wants to set up a ship-wide alert system, emergency alert system. And this is basically the precursor to the red alert. That basically would, once it goes off, the hull plating would come on, and phase cannons would be armed. And he says he'll go over it with the senior staff and pass it around and see what they all think. And then he says don't, because Reed initial calls it battle stations. He says don't call it battle stations. Think of something something less aggressive. And then he's milling it, maybe condition red. Then we see Malcolm and Trip in the mess hall, and they're discussing their projects. And Trip says, "What if you called it a Reed alert?" Ha ha. Somebody was really proud of that one. And then he talks about how the captain, he could put like something on the armrest of the chair where he would be able to access tactical data from the armrest. And then he's talking about a cup holder. Then Hoshi comes around and asks what they thought of the food, and Malcolm, he's kind of trying to be nice but doesn't really like it, and he says, to be frank, it's too salty. She tastes it and says, I don't think it's salty. And I thought this was interesting because I had last night, so in case you don't know, I've been a cook, a chef, or whatever you want to call me, for like 20 plus years. That's what I do for a living in the real world. This doesn't pay, and I'm just doing it for fun, and maybe a little bit of therapy. And I had the same issue yesterday. I was making General Tso's chicken, and we've had a lot of issues with internal issues with two different chefs quitting, like a lot of turnaround and a lot of internal issues. So we had a guest chef that works for the company that I work for come in, and I've made this dish quite a few times since I started this job. So I know how to make it. I know how the sauce is supposed to taste. I know how our clients like the sauce to be, and the recipe is same across the whole company. And so I asked the guest chef to come taste my sauce, and I said, I think it needs to be a little bit sweeter. I didn't add any salt, no salt at all. He said, I think you're right. you should add some pineapple juice. And I said, that's an excellent idea. That's what I would do if I were at home. Because that's what I do when I'm at home, when I'm making that type of sauce. Any kind of teriyaki sauce or whatever, I use pineapple juice. He, I said that we don't have pineapple juice and that I would just add more brown sugar to the sauce. He said, yes, that's exactly what you should do. Then it comes time to serve it, and everything, one wasn't, he's not a chef. He thinks he is, but he's not. Goes out and observes what's going on. And I guess one of the clients said that it was salty. He didn't say that to me. He just said that he came to me and said, people are saying that this is salty. I said, okay. Well, chef said, tasted it. I asked him to taste it. I didn't put any salt in it at all. None. Zero. All I did was add sugar, like 4 pounds of sugar, brown sugar. And the chef tasted it, said it wasn't salty, said it was fine. I asked him to taste it because I wanted to make sure, because I didn't want to have this fucking problem. Because I think this problem came up another time. I think I know how to solve it from now on, but going forward. So then he asked my coworker to go get some orange juice and put it in there, which I wish I'd have thought of that. So there's the solution: is I'm just gonna put fucking orange juice next time, or I told him about the pineapple juice situation, and I was like, we should have ordered pineapple juice, and he didn't say shit. And we're supposed to write shit on the whiteboard of shit that we need, which yesterday was the day to do the order, and usually he'll erase what he's ordered, and he didn't erase pineapple juice, which tells me that he didn't order pineapple juice. So the next time this comes around, because these menus rotate monthly, so I'm gonna have to do orange juice, and then I'm gonna ask him to taste it before it goes out, because we're not having this fucking problem again. Anyway, the moral of the story is people's taste buds are different, because another coworker had tasted it and said, I didn't think it was salty. So my guess is one person thought it was salty, and then all of a sudden, oh, we gotta change it, oh, and freak the fuck out. But he can kiss my fucking ass anyway. But I wrote that down because I wanted to tell that fucking story. Anyway, Phlox, we get back to Phlox in sickbay, and he's not letting Mayweather go. Mayweather's trying to get back to the bridge because the captain had assigned something to him, and he's like obsessed with getting back, and Phlox is obsessed with finding out what's causing this headache for Mayweather. So now we're starting to see a pattern of people becoming obsessive, having obsessive behavior. And Paul is detecting some unusual radiation coming from this singularity. Then Mayweather's like obsessed with getting back to the bridge. And then we see Hoshi back in the mess hall, and she's obsessed with making sure this family recipe is just right, which even without radiation, I've done that. because I occasionally make my own pickles, which, another side tangent. My grandma made the best, on my father's side, made the best pickles ever in the entire history of the world. How I know that? Because I've tried so many different type of pickles in my fucking almost 50 years of life on this earth, and nothing compares. And everybody's gonna say my grandma does the best mac and cheese, or my grandma does this. I'm telling you, these pickles are the best pickles I ever had. And I used to make the recipe with her when I was a kid. Then she died, and I, for the longest time, was craving those pickles. Basically, when you would bite it, like I can feel like describing what I'm about to describe to you. I can feel it already in my mouth. When you bite into them, they have like the not the sour, but the vinegar, like, has a bite to it. You know, like you can, it clenches on your jaw. But anyway, but my aunt had lost the recipe. So for about a 2 year period, I was experimenting with pickles and pickling process and all this stuff, and had to basically go off of my memory and my what my mouth remembers, for lack of a better term, of what these pickles tasted like. And I experimented over and over and over and over and over and over until I finally got what I think is about as close as it's going to get without resurrecting my grandmother and asking her somehow, or going back in time. Uh, and I wrote it down, and I've kept it. And then through my experimentation, I figured out a couple other recipes that I also liked, and wrote those down and kept it. And then eventually, my aunt gave me a recipe that she thinks was either my grandma's recipe or her aunt's, uh, my aunt's aunt recipe, which is about as close as I'm going to get without those two factors, resurrection or time machine. So I can understand obsessing over a recipe, but in in this episode, it's to a higher degree. So then T'Pol realizes at this point, because Archer comes in and he's hungry because she's not feeding anybody until this recipe is right. And she tells him, make him a sandwich. Like, you make a sandwich, bitch. No, just kidding. Uh, uh, that's when, and then he starts talking about his preface again, and wants to know what T'Pol thinks about it. So at this point, it's clear to T'Pol, who apparently is immune, that everybody else is affected by this radiation. Then Archer talks to Trip about, he wants to see, or Trip wants to see him, and at this point he's moved the chair down to engineering, and he's obsessing over the chair and wants to get precise measurements of Archer and wants to like scan him. So he's scanning Archer, and Archer starts to read this preface to him, and then he says, Trip says, it's fine, whatever. He says Archer says that there's 19 more pages. And he's like, are you writing the preface or are you writing the whole book? And then they argue about him not. He tells Trip that he doesn't know anything about writing. And Trip says, well, it seems like I'm not the only one. So they kind of argue there. Uh, then we see on the bridge, the tactical alert goes off, the red alert or whatever you want to call it, and it's really annoying sounding. It doesn't sound like the one that we're used to. And this was just a drill to see how long it would take for everybody to get to their positions. To which Archer gets mad and says, that he didn't order a drill and that not to bother him. He's got more important things to deal with. And then Malcolm starts. Trip shows up and Malcolm says that he's late, and that you know that obsessing over this chair is um, he should be worried about the tackle alert. And they start to fight, and Archer tells him to knock it off and that he doesn't want to be disturbed unless tells to Paul he doesn't want to be disturbed unless there's an actual emergency. To which later on, Paul visits Archer in his quarters and says that there is an actual emergency. The whole crew is infected. They need to examine the crew, starting with him, and Archer says, starts to. He says that he doesn't want to be bothered with this. This is not an emergency, and he basically pushes her out the door. Then she visits Phlox. Phlox is about to perform like brain surgery on Mayweather, and she tells him about the situation, that the whole crew's infected, and he he he's about to use his scalpel. He's got a scalpel, and she grabs his hand and he says to let go of my hand and points the scalpel towards her neck, and basically threatening her to where she pinches, does the Vulcan neck nerve pinch, and he passes out. And then she's doing another log where she talks about Phlox's obsession over Mayweather had produced some useful data that, in fact, the radiation is causing the problem, and she says that reversing course would make things worse because they would have to go back into the radiation longer, and by that time it would be killing them. It's eventually going to kill them. But she says that she can navigate between the stars, and we see a chart that would take them past the singularity and out of the radiation field in less than 17 minutes. But she can't do it alone. She needs a navigator. So she goes to Archer and basically shoves him into the shower turns on the cold water and makes him repeat back to her what she had told him. So basically temporarily like stops the effects of the radiation, I guess, sort of. And he says that he's in no condition to fly, but they don't have a choice. Nobody. Um, Mayweather's is been sedated, so they're flying the ship through a huge debris field. Uh, and the they have about 6 minutes left when they come across this giant meteor or whatever that's in their way, and it starts to break up, and Archer has to navigate through it, and he needs the phase cannons to come online. But T'Pol says that it would take too long for them to warm up. Then suddenly the red alert comes up, and that the weapons are online now. So that was part of what Malcolm had already installed. Then they make it through the debris field, and now everybody's back to normal. So Archer goes to Malcolm and tells him that he sees the value of the tactical alert, explains that what had happened. Then they're on they're on the bridge, and he sits down in the chair. He says he doesn't see any difference, but it feels more comfortable. And Trip tells him that he lowered it by a small percentage, and then proceeds to say, "Do you want the cup holder?" A little bit of jokiness there. And then Archer goes to the Paul and asks about what she thought about the preface that he wrote. So this one, a lot of it's a lot of nothing going on other than people being obsessed. I guess you could say, I don't know if this is true, but it kind of reminds me of Naked Time or Naked Now. There are some funny moments, but it's not enough to make up for what's basically a boring episode. And I think, I think I said last time that I liked this episode when it first aired, and I guess I did. And I think it's because in this episode they do show like a black hole, and looking back, it's bringing back up Interstellar. It looks closer to. It looks more realistic than the one on in Deep Space, the wormhole. Two different things, but whatever. Uh, uh, so in Interstellar had a wormhole in there too, which looked more realistic, and then I was able to visualize. Oh, this is what a wormhole is supposed to look like. And I think I conflated the two earlier when I was talking. So essentially, it's kind of reminiscent of the Naked Time or the Naked Now, which TNG was Naked Now, and the original series is Naked Time. However, those episodes were more entertaining and had more humor to them. And that's what this one needed. It needed more humor. Like, they tried to do it with Hoshi. I get it. But it just didn't. It didn't. And they tried to do it with the whole chair bit, you know. But it didn't. It just wasn't. It was poorly executed. Uh, and you always got to have the one person who's not affected and all that stuff. And why would radiation make you obsessed with certain things? I get it. If Gavin were here, he would say it's space radiation. Of course. Duh. So I gave it a 4 out of 10. You know, the last episode I reviewed, well, no, there was 2 episodes last Wednesday was like a boring episode. I forget what it was. So, DJ Play Nice has said a few things in the chat that I want to address. And he got Stephen Hawking, which I got it before you put it in the chat, so it counts. And it was cool for the time talking about the wormhole. I didn't like it even at the time. Me too, but only at home. Pineapple juice in the sauce. I make pickles. Okay, I make refrigerator pickles, but do not do canning. Yeah, I do. Well, my grandma did canning, and I know how to can it. I do pretty much the same refrigerator pickles. But I figured out a way to speed up the process by basically when you have when you have your brine, you have it boiling. Throw the cucumbers in there until they get green, and then turn it off, and take find a way to cool it down really quickly. One of those ice things would work, or put it in an ice bath or something like that, and that'll keep them crisp so they don't get mushy, and then it basically pickles them instantly. That's through my experimentation I was able to make that work. So you don't have to wait. Usually if you can them, it takes about a month for them to pickle. Now there's another way that I looked up, that I found, is if you have a way to slice them really thin, like paper thin, and then you put them in a bowl with your brine, then put something on top of them and weigh it down. You can, and if you use like fresh dill, garlic, salt, and pepper, and just weigh it down and let it sit. After about 3 hours, it pickles that way. But they have to be super thin. So that's a couple other methods that I figured out, and also just throwing them in the refrigerator and let it be. There's different methods. Well, he said you're saying DJ Playlist is saying that you don't have the gear for canning. Well, all you need is the jars and then the little rubber piece that goes around them, and then if you throw. So what my grandma used to do is we would take the pickles, the cucumbers, put them in the jar, boil the brine, and then pour the brine into the jar, and have if you like dill pickles, have the dill seeds either in the brine or in the jar. Then you pour it into the jar, and then you close it with the rubber seal, and the heat will basically seals it. So there you have it that way. That's how you do it. You don't have to have gear. You don't have to have. All you need is the rubber seal and the jars. You follow Alton Brown's. Yeah. Okay. Here's my issue with the Food Network. Food Network's great. I like Guy Fieri. I think Alton Brown is great. I like Bobby Flay. I used to watch uh, was it nah, the chef where you have to the what's the show where you have to ultimate what is the show where you have two chefs and they compete for they're up against the clock and then they have to present. Um, Oftentimes when I'm at work, I think of that show. I like okay. The problem with the Food Network, especially in the area where I live, which is in the suburbs of DC, there's a lot of rich people around here. Iron Chef, thank you. I think of Iron Chef a lot of times when I'm at work because a lot of times I'm up against the clock and it's like, can I get this done in time? Am I an Iron Chef? You know, and it's kind of like a little competition between me and myself. But the problem is you get rich people who want to show off to their friends and they watch the Food Network and they say, "Oh, that looks easy. I can do that." They go out and buy a restaurant, right? And then hire some chefs and then they have like these unrealistic expectations for the chefs. And this I've encountered this several times, including this place that I worked, a coffee shop that I worked with that was owned by a billionaire. It still is. The dude has put millions and millions of dollars into keeping the place open when otherwise it would fail because the food was not up to really good standards. Even the chef that I worked with was a really good guy and really knew his shit, but the owner would have these unrealistic standards and unrealistic goals and unrealistic things that you could do like wanted to do. They didn't have all they had in the it wasn't even a kitchen. It was like you had the propane burners, like two propane burners, a panini press, and an oven. And they wanted to do all this. They wanted to do like steak dinners and all this fancy shit, and they're just like, we can't do that. Like I don't care unless you're going to uh, renovate the place and build an actual kitchen with an actual grill and an actual stove and oven and all this shit. You can't do that. And they ended up firing the manager. Brought in this asshole guy was who ran. I don't know if you ever heard of Capitol Diner, but it's like a big famous diner in the suburbs of DC, where a lot of the rich fuckers go to, and senators and shit. And so they brought him in, and he was supposed to be this big shot, and he didn't know shit because in the restaurant business, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's probably that's a lot of the world, right? uh, I, you know, I should be like a head chef of a big hotel or you know restaurant or something, but I have a problem with authority, and I have a problem with people that don't know what they're talking about telling me what to do. And so every once in a while, I say the wrong thing and then either get fired or I don't get promoted. So that's the problem I have with the food. It's not their problem. It's the problem I have with people that watch the Food Network. So Alton Brown got me on this big, but Alton Brown himself, I think, is an excellent chef, and I would definitely go. I don't. The only celebrity chef recipe book I have is Justin Wilson from back in the day, and that's only because my mom had it. and then she passed away. So I went through her library of books, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take that one. I used to have a ton of cookbooks that different chefs had recommended me throughout my career, and so I went out and bought them. And but then I recently moved, and I was like, I don't need these anymore. I'm more experienced now than I was back then, and I don't have the room for them anymore. So I donated them to the library. But yes, I've seen Alton Brown's pickling process before, uh, and definitely definitely go if you don't have the equipment and you want to make it easy for yourself, definitely listen to him. Um, I've come up with or I've presented recipes to chefs that I've seen from diners, drive-ins and dives or whatever, Triple D with Guy Fieri. I've tried recipes that I've seen on that show at home. I mean, so it's not the Food Networkers what network's fault. I don't have cable anymore, so I don't really watch that shit anymore. But you can catch it on Pluto TV and stuff like that. uh, and I occasionally would watch uh, what's his name, Kitchen Nightmares, where he's like, "It's raw." Occasionally would watch him, uh, or the bar rescue shows because, and that if you watch Kitchen Nightmares, that's what I'm talking about. Rich people that don't know what they're doing, don't know what they're talking about, don't know anything about culinary stuff, and that's how they get into those situations where they're up to their fucking overflowing with debt. They have a chef that they hired that was probably an asshole, and and so they get into those situations. That's exactly what I'm talking about, and it's all over the DC area. There's nothing, and then another side tangent from that. The reason why that there are rich Congress people, if you should watch Tim Burchett on Joe Rogan. He explains how that they you walk in poor as shit and you're from a small district, and then when you leave you're a millionaire. And they brought up Nancy Pelosi as an example, but there's some on the Republican side too. And so if you want to find learn about all of that, uh, and they're dining with these people, with these celebrity chefs. They're dining. They something from them. You know, the the industrial military industrial complex. They wine them and dine them and all this stuff. And I could go on and on and on and on. But anyway, what else are you saying, DJ Play Nice? I was glad when it came along, but don't care for the majority of the programming. Guy Fieri has fucked up more great restaurants by visiting them. I would agree with that, yes. The restaurants flex to the new demand. And then I want to, I would like, every once in a while he will return. And some of them, they're doing good, but I would willing to bet that some of them after he did the show that they're in such demand that they can't even keep up, and then they have high turnover, and people are flipping out and do what I do and tell their bosses to go fuck themselves, and I would not be surprised if that's happening. Change things, including moving, sometimes fall away from what they were originally. Yeah, they get to just like celebrities, they get too big for their britches, and the quality goes down. I've been around since the early '90s. Always had friends at some of the best sports in town and live uh, that food and beverage lifestyle, including the hours, for decades. Yeah. Um, you know, Gordon Ramsay. Yeah. Jake Tapper. Yes. Jake Tapper. Definitely. He and that's the problem with the corporate media, and people will call me a Nazi for saying this, but you cannot hate the mainstream media enough, and they prove it almost daily. What was something that happened recently? uh, Trump did something that was a positive thing. I don't remember what it was, last week, and not one, no mainstream media site reported on it. Not one of them. And it was something, you know, if Biden would have done it, they would have been celebrating it like he ended world hunger. You know, and yeah, the restaurant life is not an easy one. You're up. You're Most people are working late hours. You're spending time at the bar. Um, your best friends are bar people that come in. They probably work in their business too. Uh, it's hard unless you have. That's part of the reason why I am no longer married. Is she originally started off waitressing, then started working for a bank, and we hardly ever saw each other towards the end, and sex went away towards the end. Came back briefly, then and it's hard to maintain relationships, and now it's even worse because dating apps, and most people are working are off on the weekends, where I have to work on the weekends. So it's like I can't get a date. I haven't been on a date in over a decade. Um, not whining, I'm just explaining my life, and so it's it's a nightmare. It is. You spend more time with your coworkers than your friends and family. And now that I've moved to a new area, it's still within the DC area, but it's a different town. Now I have to make new friends and uh, uh, build new relationships, and it's the older you get, it's harder and harder, because I'm not going out as much. I'm staying at home. I'm doing this, which I'm fine with. But there is a karaoke tonight, which I'm hoping to make, and maybe I'll meet somebody and make some friends at karaoke. Um, what else? And that's the problem with the news media, is if they're being wined and dined by all these people, then how can they objectively tell the news? uh, they use they keep used kitchen supply stores well stocked. Yes, there's one nearby. Well, not nearby, but was nearby where I used to live. We seem to have similar views. Oh yeah, I mean, I think most, and people, again, Star Trek was always woke. And I heard again Nerdrotic the other day again talking about. I watched one of his videos. Forget what he was talking about, but he brought up that sentiment that people bring up, and it's like, well, I certainly know where Gene Roddenberry stood, But that doesn't mean that every episode was about I love communism. You don't have to love capitalism either, but I mean, show me the alternative. Show me the alternative that works. Um, Star Trek is a fake future with with a post scarcity society where they can magically create food from a microwave looking device. If we had that, then so fucking be it. Go out and have your communistic or socialistic society. But it's not. It's, again, it's a TV show. It's not real. Like I'm willing to suspend disbelief for a lot of things, man. But you gotta you gotta fucking reality has to step in at some point. Anyway, good conversation, DJ Play Nice. Thanks for coming out. And I'm ran pretty long today. So despite the bad score that I gave this episode, a lot of thought came from it. A lot of different things sprung from me talking about this episode, and I think that's what this show is really about. Is reviewing an episode of Star Trek, and if it makes me think and talk about things in the real world, that's even better. So, apparently, at some point between last Thursday and today, I accidentally pressed the randomize button, and it's on an episode of Voyager, season 6, episode 25, The Haunting of Deck 12, which I've already reviewed. So I'm going to press the randomize again. And also, DJ Play Nice, you apparently play guitar too, so you gave me some pointers on that. So we're gonna randomize again. I will not be back tomorrow. I'll be back next Wednesday. No show tomorrow. Next Wednesday I'll be back, and it is on Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Dax, which I did a review. Did a review of that already as well. So let's randomize it again. Enterprise Season 3. Enterprise Season 3, Episode 9, North Star. Well, I did Episode 8, but not Episode 9. So next Wednesday, I will review Enterprise Season 3, Episode 9, North Star. I've seen that episode. I've seen all of these episodes. I remember liking it. This may be another one. This is another point of this show. The whole point of this show, to begin with, was when I did a review of Muse, because I initially didn't like that episode, and then revisited it and said, hey, I kind of like it a little more. Whereas the opposite happened with this episode. I initially liked it, and now I like it less. North Star, I remember liking it, and we'll see what I say on Wednesday. If I like it less, do I like it more? I don't know. We'll find out. thanks DJ Play Nice for coming out. And reload. He says to reload the show when it ends. Leave a comment, leave a like, and it only takes a moment and helps. And it's free. I've heard people say that it's free. It is free. So I also want to thank anybody that was lurking, if you're out there, and anyone that watches this in the future. The episode from Thursday got 26 views. Don't know who's viewing it and why, but thanks, people. The 26 people that viewed that.